counts 204 Brahmins, apparently exactly 51 of each group. In fact, I believe that the names of only 202, but still a large and impressive number of Brahmins are recorded. Regarding its Vedic affiliation, the group's composition seems to have been equally balanced. It almost ideally consisted of 51 Rig Vedins, 51 Sama Vedins, 51 Atharva Vedins, and, if you want, only 49 Yajur Vedins. The time has come now to say something about the corpus of Bhaumakara inscriptions as such. Most of the epigraphs which can be directly related to the Bhaumakara dynasty are inscribed on copper plates. Inscriptions engraved on one or more copper plates are a pan-Indian phenomenon and an epigraphic category which was very specific for pre-modern India. Such inscriptions are official documents, usually recording royal grants of whole villages or portions of land to religious recipients and containing not only a detailed description of the donation itself, but also a description of the royal donor. And I call these records copperplate charters or title deeds. In case of the Bhaumakara charters, one has to note that these are engraved on both sides, on the two sides of single copper plates each, with the seal directly attached to the plate. So you can see here the first side of such a Bhaumakara copper plate with the attached seal, and that would be the reverse. You will have realized that I propose to talk about the female rulers of the Bhaumakara dynasty, but have not used the term queen a single time in the roughly 1,000 words which I have spoken so far. The reason is that I first wanted to show that whatever pan-Indian or all-Indian historical phenomenon one wants to study, there will be always striking evidence from Odisha, often confirming patterns which are perhaps also found elsewhere or modifying the evidence. And it's regularly the Bhaumakaras that have to be featured in such investigations. But now I want to discuss a phenomenon which seems, for me at least, to be more specific to the Bhaumakaras and thus perhaps also more specific to Odisha. And this is the role and impact of female rulers. It is a specific feature of Bhaumakara dynastic history that in addition to epigraphic information on the reign of at least 12 kings, and you see a little bit of information on that slide. So in addition to epigraphic information on the reign of at least 12 kings, we also have evidence for the fact that 7 queens acted as rulers. Altogether, 8 copperplate charters issued by 6 kings dated in the first 150 years of the so-called Bhaumakara era are extant, as well as 15 title deeds by 5 ruling queens, dated in the last 50 years of the Bhaumakara era. I should mention here that there has been some controversy on the beginning of this era. Dinesh Chandra Sirkar, for instance, dated the beginning of this era to 831 Common Era. However, I am of course following the scholars from Odisha who have concluded that this era commenced in 736 Common Era. As a consequence, I assume that the Bhaumakaras ruled from the 8th to the 10th century and not from the 9th to the 11th. However, the exact absolute chronology is not very important for our topic. Almost all female rulers of the Bhaumakaras were widows of former Bhaumakara kings, and it seems that for a certain period, one widow almost succeeded the other. The only exception known so far is, and I think I have to go to this slide again, the only exception known so far is Queen Dandi Mahadevi, which you find here as my number 17, who in her own records is described as the daughter of Queen Gauri, who had followed her deceased husband Shubhakara V on the throne. So we see all this here. In that period, there were also some probably weak male regents in power, but no inscriptions issued by them are known so far. Like their male counterparts, the queen regents of the Baumakara dynasty had typical royal title deeds produced, with genealogical descriptions of the family, recording the sequence of male and female rulers, including the relevant relationships, in a way which in their understanding or in the understanding of their chancellery, their court, must have been the politically correct at that time. But the actual line of succession does not always become completely clear from the individual charters or copperplates. Let us start from the beginning. Queens were already mentioned in the early grants of the Baumakara kings. In the Chaurasi plate of Shivakara II, and I'll point him out, it's number 4, year 12, and this plate is preserved at the Odisha State Museum. The ruling Baumakara king is described as grandson of Shivakara I and of Mahadevi Jayavali Devi, and as a son of Shubhakara I and Mahadevi Madhava Devi. And let us come to another example. This is the Tirundya plate of Shubhakara II, year 100, also preserved here in Bhubaneswar at the Odisha State Museum. The Bauma ruler is described as son of Shivakara II and Mahadevi Mohini Devi. Shubhakara II granted a whole village at the request, Vijnaptya, of Queen or Princess Rajni Nrina to 6 Yachovedins. And let us come to another example. In the Hindol and Darakota plates of Shubhakara III, year 103, and here you always find the ruler and then the years given in the copper plate charters, and in brackets I have put the number of copper plates we know as of now to have been issued from these rulers. So in 2 of the plates, they are preserved now, one in the Odisha State Museum and one in the Baripada Museum, also in Odisha. The Kara king, so at that time the dynasty already was named after the second component of the names, is described as son of Shantikara I and Mahadevi, Tribhuvana Mahadevi I, who is labeled as being born from the ornament of the family originating from the Nagas. So far, queens were included in the description of the line of succession as mothers of male rulers, a tradition followed by several dynasties in India, also elsewhere. But this Tribhuvana Mahadevi I, the wife or rather widow of the deceased king Shantikara I, was the first queen who herself ascended the Baumakara throne. Most probably, we still do not know any inscription of her own. In the 3 Tolcha plates of the years 141 and 149, all preserved and kept in the Baripada Museum, it is mentioned that after her husband's and her son's Shubhakara III's sudden demise, Tribhuvana Mahadevi I reigned for her minor grandson Shantikara II, to whom she later handed over the sovereignty. It is said that she became Nirapa with long final R, which is probably an attempt to create an appropriate designation for her for a female ruler. The two bout plates of the year 158, I will show this to you also here. So this is the year. We are now at this position in the pedigree. So in the two so-called bout plates of the year 158, also preserved at the Odisha State Museum, these two mention Tribhuvana Mahadevi I again, but under another name. Now she is named Goswamini. These copper plates state that she succeeded Shubhakara III because he had left no son. The Sanskrit says, Tasmin Ajata Tanu Janmani. And that the queen, at the time of his majority, handed over the power to her grandson, Shantikara II. If we take this literally, this means that Shantikara II, I perhaps should point out to him here on the chart, so this is the gentleman, could not have been the son of Shubhakara III, but must have been a grandson from another son or perhaps even a daughter of Goswamini or Tribhuvana Mahadevi I. These indications point into one and the same direction. Queens stepped in as rulers in case of actual or potential succession disputes or at least crisis. In the torture plate of the year 141, already mentioned, another queen, Hira Mahadevi, she is mentioned on the slide, chief wife of Shantikara II and mother of the current ruler Shubhakara IV, is labeled as Maharajadiraja Parameshwari. For the sake of comparison, I would like to add, and you can see that on the slide as well, Shubhakara IV bore the imperial titles Paramavataraka, Maharajadiraja, Parameshwara, and the religious epithet Parama Maheshwara, so he was a Shaiva. Parameshwari is the expected feminine equivalent for Parameshwara, whereas the masculine form Maharajadiraja, referring to a queen, shows the lack of a more appropriate term for females. The use of imperial titles for the queen Hira Mahadevi perhaps indicates that she also might have ruled at some point of time, although this is never explicitly mentioned in any of the extant records. The two bout plates of the year 158, so I'm coming back and forth to this chart to always show you where we are right now. So the two so-called bout plates already mentioned are the first known examples of Baumakara charters commissioned, issued by a ruling queen, in this case, Tribhuvana Mahadevi II. Shubhakara IV, this is year 141 or 145 of the Baumakara era, was married to Prithvi Mahadevi, the daughter of the king of Kosala, who assumed power after Shivakara III's rule. We have the year 149 for him, which you can also see on the chart. And she, which is expressly said in the charter, was then known in the world as Tribhuvana Mahadevi, and we call her Tribhuvana Mahadevi II, but all the numbering is done by scholars, not by the inscriptions themselves. The official explanation for her regency, given in her own two records of the year 158, and you can easily find the ladies because the ladies are all in red on that chart, is that her husband, Shubhakara IV, as well as his younger brother, Shivakara III, both passed away without leaving any male offspring. This claim is somewhat doubtful with regard to her brother-in-law, as the reigns of two sons of Shivakara III are referred to in later charters. In this regard, she apparently followed legitimation strategies practiced by male rulers, as well as the subduing of competitors and the wiping out of rivalries. Tribhuvana Mahadevi II and all later female rulers used the imperial titles Paramabhatarika and Maharajadhiraja Parameshwari. The latter two always combined as Dvandva compound, and they also used a copperplate seal with the possible coronation name, at least this is how I interpret this name, Tribhuvana Mahadevi. And here you can see one specimen seal. According to the testimony of two copper plates of the year 160, we come back to our chart, and 64, these title deeds were issued by another queen named Tribhuvana Mahadevi Goswamini, whose identity is not yet clear. Perhaps she was a Tribhuvana Mahadevi III. She is described as the daughter of Raja Maladeva of the southern region, and as the wife, or rather the widow, of King Lalitahara, who might perhaps be identical with Shivakara III. This interpretation would actually mean, as said, that one widow succeeded the other widow. It is said that this Tribhuvana Mahadevi had acquired the throne by right of succession, and that she delighted the people by light taxation, characteristics which otherwise are also attested for male rulers. Shubhakara V was succeeded by Gauri Mahadevi, and you find her also on the chart as number 16. After her, for the first time, not a widow ascended the throne, but Dandi Mahadevi, the daughter, perhaps unmarried daughter, but one doesn't know, of Gauri Mahadevi. 8 copperplate charters, and that is a large number in this corpus, of Dandi Mahadevi are preserved. One of them recently found, giving her name surprisingly not as Dandi Mahadevi, but as Queen Tribhuvana Mahadevi, and according to our calculation, this would be Tribhuvana Mahadevi IV. And this is the plate, which you have already seen, and that is the reverse of the same plate, and the seal which you had seen before is also from that plate. The last female rulers of the Baumakara dynasty were, and we go back to our chart, and this is in the lower portion here, where Vakula Mahadevi, the stepmother of Dandi Mahadevi and second widow of Shubhakara V, as well as Dharma Mahadevi, the widow of King Shantikara III. As I said, all this looks like a regional tradition of widow succession. The female Baumakara rulers used imperial titles and religious epithets along the lines of the practice followed by their male predecessors, but with, of course, own preferences, which are quite different. Similar to their male counterparts, the queen regents made endowments in order to acquire merit for themselves and for their parents. The deceased husbands were not specifically mentioned in this formula of religious merit of punya, which somehow at least indirectly implies that nobody born into the Baumakara family was supposed to directly benefit from the merit accrued through the grants of the ruling queens. However, in all extant charters of Baumakara kings and in most of the charters issued by queen regents, a very specific punya formula was being used. And you find that also on the slide at the beginning. So it's, in my translation, for augmenting the religious merit of mother and father, myself and all beings. Mata Pitror Atmanach Sarva Sattvanan Cha Punya Bivridaye. The phrasing is distinctly Buddhist, and the use of this expression in charters of the early Baumakara rulers can be explained with the fact that these kings had personal leanings towards Buddhism, but somehow this formula was also inherited then and taken over for later charters. While, as already mentioned, some of the early Baumakara kings declared themselves to be followers of Buddhism, most of the male rulers of that royal line were Shaivas, Parama Maheshvara, as the mainstream of medieval Indian rulers. In contrast, the ruling queens were labeled either Parama Vaishnavi or Parama Maheshwari. The queens Tribhuvana Mahadevi II and Tribhuvana Mahadevi III were Parama Vaishnavi. The queens Dandi Mahadevi, Vakula Mahadevi, and Dharma Mahadevi were labeled Parama Maheshwari. Especially the Vaishnava influence might have been due to the fact that these queens originated from non-Baumakara dynasties. But there is also another interesting aspect in it. In several regions of India, it was particularly the women of royal families who fostered Buddhism and also Jainism. In case of the Baumakara dynasty, it seems to have been rather the opposite. Despite the diverse religious affiliations of the Baumakaras, their royal seal bore the Shaiva emblem of a couchant bull with the symbols for sun and moon throughout the whole rule of the dynasty. Only the seal legend was regularly updated as it was giving the name of the current ruler. Most Baumakara charters record endowments of whole villages as text benefices, usually in the form of one village per title deed, sometimes with another hamlet attached to the main grant. The patronage patterns were the same among Baumakara kings and ruling queens, with a strong preference, like in many other parts of the subcontinent, for Vedic Brahmins. What I wanted to show with all these details is the following. There are, of course, isolated examples of queens stepping in as a kind of placeholders for their sons or other potential minor crown princes. The most striking case probably being that of Prabhavati Gupta, the Gupta princess and Vakataka queen from other regions of India. However, such a sequence of ruling queens as seen in the history of the Baumakara dynasty is, to my knowledge, rarely attested for any other region. And it seems to me to be something very specific for Odisha in that period. And now I come to my concluding remarks. Arlo Griffiths will have told you that in his talk already about our research project Dharma, for which we are inter alia also studying epigraphic material again, including that of the Baumakara dynasty. And in the introduction, the kind introduction of my person, it was also referred to that we are studying material from Odisha as well. Arlo, my colleague Amandine Batelier-Bricou, who is also present here today, and I have photographed and measured Baumakara and Somavanshin copper plates in the Odisha State Museum last year, and we want to continue this research this year, also in other institutions here in Odisha, where such treasures from Odisha's past are being kept. I want to conclude in thanking three ladies who were very supportive to our endeavors. This is, first of all, Dr. Nivedita Mohanty, who is present here as well and was kindly attending my lectures, has been kindly attending my lecture. The second lady is Dr. Bhagyalipi Malla, Superintendent of the Odisha State Museum. And the third is Dr. Bharati Pal, the curator. Because I have to say, after all my experience, and you have heard that I have worked also on other regions of India, the experience here in Odisha is outstanding, and especially in Bhubaneswar, we got so much support which we hardly found anywhere else. And I believe this is also because of the support of these females. There are, of course, also male supporters like Dr. Umakant Mishra and many others, Subrata Acharya, but I want to thank especially the ladies because that was the topic of today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. May we request to please kindly put your hands together a little louder for Professor Annette Smith-Chen, ladies and gentlemen. She enlightened us on female rulers in medieval Odisha, the case of Bhomakara queens. Thank you so much, madam, from core of our hearts. Now the session is open for the questions. If anyone, jodi kahanko pakhare kichi prashna achi, kichi shabda rakhiba pai chahunchନ୍ତି, tahale apon mane pachari paribe. Anurodh kariya pai chahibe eko mic. ମୁଁ ଅନୁରୋଧ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ଚାହିଁବି ଦୁଇଟି କର୍ଡଲେସ୍ ଗୋଟେ ଷ୍ଟେଜ୍କୁ ଆମେ ଦେବା ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ଅଡିଏନ୍ସ ନିଶ୍ଚିତ ଭାବରେ ସାର୍। ଓଡ଼ିଆ ଭାଷା ଅତୀତର ଅସ୍ତିତ୍ୱ ଆଲୋକପାତ କରାଯାଇଥିବା ବିଶ୍ୱବସ୍ତୁରୁ ଆମେ ସମସ୍ତେ ଜାଣିବାକୁ ପାଇଲୁ, ବୁଝିବାକୁ ପାଇଲୁ। ବିଶ୍ୱାସ ଅତୀତ ଏବଂ ଭବିଷ୍ୟତକୁ ଦୁଇଟିକୁ ସଂଯୋଗ କରୁଥିବା ଛାତ୍ରଛାତ୍ରୀ ବୃନ୍ଦମାନଙ୍କ ମଧ୍ୟରେ ମନସ୍ପଟରେ ଅନେକ ଗୁଡ଼ାଏ ପ୍ରଶ୍ନର ଉତ୍ତର ଏହିସବୁ ଆଲୋଚନାରୁ ନିଶ୍ଚିତ ଭାବରେ ପାଇଥିବେ। ଆଉ ଏକ ମାଇକ୍ ଷ୍ଟେଜ୍ ପାଇଁ, ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ମାଇକ୍ କର୍ଡଲେସ୍ ଷ୍ଟେଜ୍ ପାଇଁ ଆମକୁ ଦରକାର।
ଯାହା ହଉ ଆମର ଏଇ प्रथम विश्व ओडिया भाषा सम्मेलन 2024 माननीय मुख्यमंत्री महोदय श्रीयुक्त विजय पट्टनायक एवं 5T सचिव श्रीयुक्त कार्तिक पांड्यन एवं जिलापाल महोदय महोदय समस्त आमर ओडिया प्रेमी समस्त सज्जन मंडली विदुषी एवं विद्वान मान द्वारा आयोजित जो है आमर ओडिशा पाई सौभाग्य। आमर ओडिशा सारा विश्व रे प्रसिद्ध थिला अच्छी रहिबो सेही भलिया भारत माता सेही भलिया सारा विश्व रे गुरु होई कि थिला गुरु होई कि अच्छी गुरु होई कि रहिबो
महोदय क्षमा चाहिए
काटि परिबे नै
एवं महोदय क्षमा चाहिए
वर्तमान कविताटी प्राचीन कविताटी मोर मने अछि किंतु तार कवि किए महाशय मु पचारिबी जे जननी जन्म भूमि एई मोर गाँ सबुठु मधुर लागे मोते तार ना ता छाती रे पाद देई शिखिली मुचाली खेली खेली उड़ाइली केते धूलिवाली धोइली ता प्रजापति चपी चपी जाई फिंगी देली फूल केते रस खाई खाई तार बण बुदा बुली खाइली मुकोली बरगछ उहल रे खेलिली मुदोली जमा कली देहे तार जेते कलिया नई नाल बंध पानी कली मुगोलिया।
महोदय धन्यवाद देबो आपनको अनेक अनेक धन्यवाद एते सुंदर भाबरे कविताटी पाठ करिथिबारु अनुरोध करिया पई चाहिबु
एई कविताटी रो कवि किए सेटा मु पचरिया को चाहूची मन मोर थिला प्राचीन काल में जेतल पढुथिली
निश्चित भाबरे सर विषय वस्तु किछि अलग अछि आलोकपात इतिहास ऊपर किछि अलग थिला
दया करी एई
अनुरोध करबु
कविताटी रो कवि किए
आज्ञा
कवयित्री किए ता पचरिया
निश्चित निश्चित अनेक अनेक धन्यवाद किंतु विषय वस्तु किछि अलग थिला धन्यवाद दवा पई चाहिबु प्रोफेसर डॉक्टर एनेट स्मिथ-चेन करो। थैंक यू सो मच मैम फॉर एनलाइटनिंग अस on the topic, on the things we should get to know and we should learn about the history as well.
Excuse me, I have a question for
Sir.
a lecture. May
Sir.
I?
Yes, sir.
So, vielen Dank, Dr. Annette. Thank you so much. I am Ananta Kumar Giri from the Madras Institute of Development Studies. Now, your work is so fascinating, and the kind of border crossing space in which the Saiva, the Buddhist, and the Vedic was interacting. It is in that context, these female rulers that you are presenting, for example, Prithvi Mahadevi, Tribhuvana Mahadevi. Now, whether there was a border crossing dialogue with Tantra, this is my first query. My second query is, in terms of study, this study of inscription, now how it is also accompanied by a transdisciplinary effort. For example, archaeology, inscription studies, history, also philosophy. So my submission is that these female rulers, as rulers, since you really give primacy to the female and the feminine, whether there was any kind of a different way of power, a different kind of rulership compared to male rulers. Thank you so much.
Check.
Thank you for this question, or for these several questions. Maybe I start with the first part of the second question, as I have understood it. It's highly essential to have an interdisciplinary approach. That is absolutely right. So, and this is also something which we try in our research project to give this a particular focus. So we are trying to include archaeological research, also the research of literary sources, manuscript sources, besides inscriptions. We are facing the issue which we are always facing for pre-modern Indian history, that at times we don't have the full range of all the sources. At other times we get contradictory evidence from the different sources, and we have to reconcile or try to reconcile these different sources. But it's a highly essential issue, and we try to address this as well. That's very true. I didn't do it in my talk, but in general, yes. So the second part of the second question, whether there's anything particular about these female rulers being females, I mean, you will have realized during my talk that I did not really apply a feminist approach or anything like this, which is not my personal approach, but I found it still striking, this very female presence in the dynastic history. And I think my examples have shown, I haven't brought it to that very, very clear point, that actually the female rulers acted very much the same way as the male rulers acted. They acted as rulers. And when there were differences, or if there were differences, it was more from their personal dynastic background. So they were not of course, Baumakara origin. So they brought, so to say, their inheritance from their local regions or from their dynasties into that. So that is more of the approach here. And I also find quite interesting what I said about the terminology, the titles being used. Okay, for Parameshvara, you find a female equivalent. For Paramavataraka, you find a female equivalent. But what about Maharaja Di Raja? So that compound, of course, could be also translated in a different way. But frankly speaking, when I read these inscriptions and saw that they used this title, this very powerful title, Maharaja Di Raja, then I had the, I mean, grammatically correct only in compound, and it could be translated also in another way. But then I was reminded of how I encountered with a police lady once in Odisha, and she told me that they somehow expected to be addressed as sir, because the full power was very often attributed to the male titles. But so there's not so much about females and males in the distinction of the practices, etc., but it's more about their personal background. But what I wanted to stress, and that I find quite striking, that we have such a strong influence of females who made it to power in this a particular period of time in Odisha and this dynasty.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for the question, and thank you so much, Professor Dr. Smith-Chen, for enlightening us with all the good answers. Ladies and gentlemen, may we request you all, please kindly put your hands together. Here is the time for the felicitation. Sambardhanara Parva Vartaman, अनुरोध करिया पई चाहिबु श्रीजुक्त हेमंत शर्मा आईएएस प्रमुख शासन सचिव शिल्प विभाग ओडिशा सरकार एवं तांको सह मंच उपरे जोग दैछन्ते श्रीजुक्त वीर विक्रम यादव आईएएस प्रमुख शासन सचिव पूर्त एवं खाद्य जोगाण और खाउटी कल्याण विभाग ओडिशा सरकार ए सम्मान आजिर कार्यक्रम रे राज्य सरकार तरफ आज मंच सम्मुखें बसथिबा समस्त अतिथिगण तरफ प्रोफेसर डॉक्टर एनेट स्मिथ-चेन को पाई अनेक अनेक धन्यवाद. Thank you so very much, sir, for doing the honors. करताली प्रकंपन आज कक्ष गुंजरी उठा दरकार. सम्मान पर्व, साहित्यर पर्व, इतिहास पर्व, संस्कृति एवं परंपरा पर्व जहाँ आमको आगे नौची. Thank you so very much, madam, again from the core of our hearts.
I have to have the last word. I want to thank you all for your great hospitality.
Yeah.